Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank each of the witnesses for joining us today. I am one of the people who has some concerns with this treaty, and I assure you that my concerns are rooted in something more than mythology. They're rooted in something more than an editorial page. They are rooted first and foremost in America's national sovereignty, and I think that is not something that is to be discounted here. One of the exchanges that I've appreciated during the course of our discussion this morning has surrounded the what has been described at times as a veto on the Council. I want to drill down on that issue a little bit and make sure I understand it correctly. My reading of Article 158 of the treaty is that it creates three basic bodies. It creates the Assembly, it creates the Council, and it creates the Secretariat, as outlined in Section 1 of Article 158. Now, in Article 160, we have a basic definition of the purpose of the Assembly, and it describes that purpose as follows. It says that the Assembly shall be considered the supreme organ of the authority, meaning the International Seabed Authority based in Kingston, Jamaica. Then we move to Article 162, which describes the purpose of the Council. This is the body, the 36-member body, not to be confused with the 160-plus member body that is the Assembly. The Council, as I understand it, is empowered to do a number of things, including to exercise the power outlined in Section 2 of Article 162, subsection O, 1, which is to recommend to the Assembly rules, regulations, and procedures on the equitable sharing of financial and other economic benefits derived from activities in the area, and the payments and contributions made pursuant to Article 82. So these are the royalties we're talking about, the escalating royalties that begin at 1% 5 years into the operation of the treaty, escalate gradually up until they get to 7%, where they remain thereafter once they achieve that level. It appears to me, based on my reading of Article 162, that the power of the Council, this body on which the United States has a seat and has what you've described as veto power, is a recommending body. And it appears also to me, as I look back at 160, Section 160, subsection 2, G, that it is up to the Assembly and not to the Council to decide upon the equitable sharing of financial and other economic benefits from activities in the area. So, Secretary Clinton, I was wondering if you could help me understand, is my reading correct or am I missing something?
Senator, the Assembly cannot take up an issue unless recommended by the Council. Any decision that would impose any obligations on the United States or otherwise deal with substance must go through the Council. The Secretariat has no decision-making authority. So, in effect, the practical consequences of this is that the United States would have the right to reject, or in our parlance, veto, any decision that would result in a substantive obligation on the United States or that would have financial and budgetary implications. And that is due to the fact that the U.S. is unique in having a permanent seat on the Seabed Authority Council, which is the main decision-making body, and that important decisions must be made by consensus. So it is our very strong conviction that as a party, the U.S. would have an unprecedented ability to influence the deep seabed mining activities worldwide. There is no other international organization that gives one country and one country only a permanent membership on the key decision-making body. So as examples of decisions subject to U.S. approval, there would be any rules, regulations, or procedures implementing the seabed mining regime or amendments thereto, any decisions relating to the distribution of payments for oil and gas production on the continental shelf beyond 200 nautical miles, adoption of any amendments to the seabed mining regime, and just finally, you know, I think it is worth saying, and this really echoes something that the chairman said, royalties under this convention are not a net loss to the United States, but a net gain, because companies will not drill that far out. So there is no money that would be coming to the Treasury or to the profit of the companies. And if we're a party, we gain from both domestic royalties and oil production. So, you know, I know that there is, with any written document, and I am a recovering lawyer, so I have been in this position in my past life, there is a way to, you know, raise questions about where the comma is placed or where the, you know, the parentheses occurs. But this debate over this convention has now gone on for 20 years, and when you look at the people from, you know, Jim Baker to Condi Rice to George Shultz to Michael Chertoff to Stephen Hadley, who have supported this in both administrations, Republican and Democratic, I just don't think we're all missing something, Senator. I think that we are trying our best to make a case that the United States will be advantaged and that, in fact, our sovereignty will be advanced.
Thank you, Secretary Clinton, and I appreciate your analysis on that. I appreciate the fact that that is your position, that it is the position of the administration. As I too am a recovering lawyer, we have to call ourselves recovering rather than cured or ex-lawyer. As I read this, I see the fact that the Assembly shall be considered the supreme organ, and I also see that the Assembly and not the Council has ultimate power to decide upon the equitable sharing of financial and other benefits. And so that causes me to ask the question, what if those who serve on the Assembly disagree with your interpretation? I understand it's your interpretation and that of the administration. I also understand that it's your interpretation and that of the administration, that of the United States of America, I suppose you could say, that the treaty does not, as you point out, adopt any framework to tie the United States into a climate change control regime or any kind of system that could limit the emission of greenhouse gases. But in that context, the climate change context, and in this context, what happens if the Assembly takes a different position? And in the climate change context, could not the Assembly reach a different conclusion and read several provisions of the treaty, including Articles 207 and 212, coupled with the dispute resolution provisions of Annex 6, could it not take that interpretation and conclude differently from the conclusions that you've reached today?
Well, we do not believe that they could on either the plain reading or the intent of the convention, but we also believe, Senator, that concerns such as these are not only going to be properly vetted in these series of hearings, but certainly can be taken into account with the resolution of ratification. You know, there is no obligation that the United States in the area of climate change would be forced to accept or adopt by anything done by the Assembly under the Convention on the Law of the Seas. But as an abundance of caution, that could certainly be clarified and insisted upon in ratification resolution language.
I see that my time has expired, Mr. Chairman. As I close, I'd just like to point out that there is not just the Assembly. We could get hauled into a tribunal called for under the Annex, and at that point, if this is a ratified treaty, arguably our courts would be bound to enforce the judgments of an international tribunal convened under the authority. Thank you.